Hello friend, and welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for tuning in. And so before you listen to what you're just about to listen to, which is what you clicked in the video for, a conversation on race, racism, being a black woman, all that stuff, I just wanted to preface this by saying that it is a podcast recording, and so if you'd prefer to listen to the podcast version, that will be linked down below in the description. But otherwise, yeah, and there is no video because I didn't take video. It was just an audio clip that I recorded. But I thought it would be really interesting and good to put it up on YouTube. And so if you prefer that, then you can listen to that. Sorry for the lack of video content, but I think it's quite fitting that it's going to be a black screen. Considering everything I'm talking about. But yeah, thank you so much for listening. And also I made a blog post where I put resources on things that you can do, conversations to have, movements to look into, videos to watch and educate ourselves in this time, just so that we are continually checking our hearts for, biases and prejudices and all that stuff. I did a blog post about that and explaining everything in the description. And once again, I am not in a terrible position with this. There are other people of color who have experienced much worse than me, but I just wanted to show up in some way and with the voice that I can. And I haven't been the best with the Black Lives Matter movement. Previously, I sort of posted here and there about it, but wasn't really truly, amplified about it. But, I think it's better to start now. And now's the best time to start. And so I hope that encourages you, friend. Let's keep on loving like Jesus. Let's keep the conversation going. This isn't going to be an overnight thing, but this is going to be an over a lifetime thing, and it starts with you. And I, and this is as much for me as it is for you. And so, yeah. Let's dive right into this. Sorry for the lack of video. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, friend. And I hope you listen to the full episode. It is quite a long one, 30 minutes, but I hope you stick with it. All right, let's get it. Hello friend, welcome back to my podcast. Thank you so much for listening. So for today's episode, I honestly just want to just have a real conversation about being black, about race, about me being a black woman, especially in this time, with everything that's happening at the moment. And honestly, just be real with you guys and to just, communicate and talk about it, Yeah, and so before we hop right in, we are going to pray. But before I do that, thank you so much for listening. Before we go any further, don't forget to follow at the Project Lumiere on Instagram, at the Project Lumiere, and to follow my blog, theprojectlumiere.com. Everything will be linked in the show notes below. And so let me just pray. Father God, I thank you. Thank you for your for how sovereign you are, Lord. Thank you that you're God and you're good and you're never going to let us down. Thank you, Lord, that in this time of just such unrest and of such injustice, but also of such beauty, you are still present and you are still there. And even as I have this conversation, Lord, I pray that this would be an uplifting conversation, Father, both for myself and for whoever's listening to this, Lord. Thank you that you just call us to step up in times like this, and to help us to do that. In your precious name I pray, amen. So let's dive right in. And so just a bit of background. So my name is Zoe Tuguma. I am a black 18-year-old woman, right? And I don't know, I've sort of, especially, and I live in South Africa, so there's the Black Lives Matter movement. Obviously started in America. It's very prominent in America. I'm not saying that it shouldn't be anywhere. Actually, before I dive into all that, I just have to say, please give me grace as I navigate this conversation. I'm not going to be politically correct. I'm not going to say all the things correctly, but I'm trying, and this is my perspective, And yeah, and I, as one person, cannot speak for an entire race. I cannot speak for an entire group of women. This is just sort of my opinions. And if you disagree with what I have to say, that's cool too, And you do not have to follow what I have to say, but we have to be respectful in how we react to each other, and how we interact with each other. And so the Black Lives Matter movement, I think is absolutely brilliant. But I think for a long time I sort of wasn't very very vocal about it. I don't know why. Actually, I'll dive into that in a bit. But I think, especially when it's so easy when something is happening literally half the world away, to sort of be quiet about things. And looking back now, that's not okay. We do have to speak out against injustice. And I think just the way I have grown up inadvertently, not on purpose, but I've had personally I've carried a lot of shame about the color of my skin, even about my ethnicity. I was born in Zimbabwe, and moved to South Africa. And so, and there's a big there have been xenophobic, times, or things happening, and especially in primary school, it was so weird if you're different, and there was so much associated with that. And so on top of and I have grown up most of my life in predominantly white communities. There's nothing wrong with that. I think I'm not going to get into that, but there's nothing wrong with that at all. And this isn't blaming a single person, but I just think that for me personally, and I had internalized a lot of shame associated with where I'm coming from, and because of that, the color of my skin, and I think that was a very personal thing. And I think a lot of times it's so easy to take what the signals you're receiving and flip them, but then receive them the wrong way, if that makes sense. And that's what happened with me. And so with the Black Lives Matter movement, me as a Black person, I am still learning. I am still educating myself personally. And I think that's what we should all be doing, and I think with the whole issue, the color of your skin does not exclude you from biases. Last year, something happened, and I really had to sit down and check where are my biases? What prejudices do I have in my own life, and even becoming comfortable with speaking about the fact that I'm Black, saying yeah, I'm a Black girl, or that person is a white person, and not coming from a hateful place, but it's just a fact, right? Just you'll say that lady over there or that guy over there, and so I am still educating myself. And I think the whole thing about this is to just check your own heart and to check your own prejudices, and just because you're not Black or you're not a person of color doesn't mean that you can't reach out to people and check how are they doing, to watch your own reaction, to check your own heart. Sure, what are the prejudices that I have in my own heart? How am I viewing things? Is there any ounce of racism in my heart? But then not stopping there. I've been seeing a lot lately of not just being against racism, or not just saying no to racism, but being anti-racism. And I love that, the thought of okay, I don't agree with this, and so I'm choosing to be anti-racism. And a big thing that has been going around is that to be silent is to be complicit. And this is so, so true. And I've been silent sometimes, me, myself, I have been silent sometimes. And so even for me, it's checking my own, biases. And I think a big thing that will start the change is the heart. I've really been digging into the heart lately, and it's crazy that what comes out of the mouth and the actions that we do is a direct reflection of our hearts and our heart state. And so when nasty things or racist things are coming out of your mouth, that is a literal direct reflection on your heart, right? That's a direct reflection of the state of your heart. And I think now, and you'll never have a better time than now in quarantine, in lockdown, to sit with the Lord and check your heart and work through certain issues in your heart, and work through certain biases and prejudices in your heart. I think every single person on the planet has certain biases and prejudices, and you can actively choose to change those and to view things in a different way, and yeah, and I think, oh man, this issue, I personally am not, I don't know. I think this has something to do with the way that I was like raised up. I'm not a very like, I'm not going to go on social media and swear against people and put all these things on my stories and stuff. But I think there is a time to speak up, and your words, and Black lives do matter. And all lives do matter, but specifically in this time when the issue has been brought up, Black lives do matter. And alongside with this, last year we were going through, especially in South Africa, just this thing of like gender-based violence, and women as well, and violence against women and children. And I think, I am, I find it interesting how, just like how historically, and I hope I don't offend anyone saying this, and this is coming from literally like a place of love, but I find it interesting how historically, even when you look at like apartheid or oppression in any sense, it starts with like, even like looking back to like the Holocaust, all these awful absolutely heartbreaking things. It started sort of the hierarchy was sort of men then women, right? I mean, women have been battling against like being recognized at the same level as men in terms of the work field, which I agree with, in like roles in the home, that's a different story. I'm not all for that, that's a podcast for another day. But it was sort of men then women, right? And then within that, it was sort of like from the people of the least color, if that makes sense, to the people of the most color. And so as a Black woman, it's literally like at the very bottom of the like list, and we can change that, right? Our generation, and we can change that, and we can start that, because it's not going to change until someone does something to change it. It's not it's Albert Einstein says something like stupidity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. And that's so true. Even with this, we can't keep doing the same things we've done throughout history and expect a change. I mean, I was chatting to my friend about this, and I did like a little poem about it, and sometimes it's in the smallest of ways. Sometimes your bias shows up in the smallest of ways, and I think it's just monitoring that. I mean, I cannot count the number of times as a woman that I've been catcalled at by men, and men my own race, men different races, whatever it is, but the amount of times that I've been catcalled, right, that starts in the heart. And just the and of course there's like sort of like racial tension and all that stuff that I've experienced as well, right? I absolutely do not have it like terrible, because there are people who have experienced much worse things than me, but I've experienced that, and oftentimes it's in the little things, and so it's just about checking yourself, and I find it interesting. I used to think, so this will make sense in a minute, but so I used to think that there was this quote like that, Love is Blind, and there was a Netflix series, Love is Blind, and I used to think like love is blind, but I think I've come to realize, and someone said this about the show, it's that love is not blind. Love sees it all and chooses to stay even after seeing it all, and I find that so beautiful. And I and so then this relates to the thing of like you can't see color, right? Or you shouldn't see color, like we're all equal, which we are 1000% all equal. But I think it doesn't work that way. You can't say, and I used to believe this personally, like, I'm here, I'll be the first to say, I used to believe, like, don't see color, but it's not true. We are all different, but we have strengths in that, just like with men and women. You can't say like we're all the same, because we're not. Men and women were created different by God, but equally in that respect. We have different roles, but each of those roles are equal, and you can't try and change that. And so even with color, like, you can't say like, let's not see color, right? No, let's see color. Let's acknowledge our differences, but within those differences, let's choose to love still, right? Let's choose to show grace still. And I think that's where that heart of love comes from as well, because God did create us different. There's this parable that just keeps sticking with me, and it's in Matthew. Actually, let's dive into it. I read a commentary about it, and I thought the commentary was rather interesting. And so it's in Matthew, I think it's like Matthew 15. Let me pull it up on my Bible. Yeah. Alright, so Matthew 15 from verse 21 to verse 28, and so it's the faith of a Canaanite woman, and so you should go read it. But I think, with Jesus as well, Jesus saw color. He didn't, and I'll jump into that in this parable, and God created color, right? God created black and white and all the in-betweens, and he created different races, and I think there's such beauty in that. Like, there's such beauty. How boring would it be if we're all the same? The problem comes in where then there's a hierarchy put in, where then we're like, okay, let's treat this one group better or worse because of how they look, or because of who they are, and that's not all right, and I think we as people need to choose to see it all and choose to love it all, and so the faith of a Canaanite woman, actually let me read it for you guys, because might as well, it's like 7 verses. So it says, leaving that place, Jesus withdrew, and this was just after like speaking to the Pharisees about his disciples, and where Jesus, this is the irony, how crazy is this? This is just after the verse where Jesus says, so in verse 18 he says, but the things that come out of a person's mouth come from the heart, and these defile them. Verse 19, for out of the heart come evil thoughts, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false testimony, slander. These are what defile a person, but eating with unwashed hands does not defile them. How crazy. Just after Jesus saying, like, what comes out of the mouth is a direct reflection of the heart and of the actions, right? And all of your actions stem from your heart. He then talks about the faith of a Canaanite woman. And so it says, leaving that place, Jesus withdrew, this is verse 21, to the region of Tyre and Sidon, or Sidon, I don't know. A Canaanite woman from that vicinity came to him, crying out, Lord, Son of David, have mercy on me. My daughter is demon-possessed and suffering terribly. Jesus did not answer a word, so his disciples came to him and urged him, send her away, for she keeps crying out after us. He answered, I was sent only to the lost sheep of Israel. The woman came and knelt before him. Lord, help me, and she said. He replied, it is not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs. Yes, it is, Lord, she said. Even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table. He then said to her, woman, you have great faith. Your request is granted. And her daughter was healed at that moment. And so reading this parable at first, I was confused, and it's still, I don't know why, this parable is just sitting with me, and I need to dive more into it. But so basically Jesus was a Jew, right? And a Canaanite woman, that's a different like ethnic group, right? A Canaanite woman, and they weren't like the best relations between the Canaanites and the Israelites, right? And I find it interesting, he left that place and withdrew to the region of Tyre and Sidon. So he went there because he knew that he needed to encounter her. But that feels kind of contradictory, right? Because when when she speaks to him, he doesn't say a word, right? And then his disciples say, like, send her away. And then he says, I was sent only to the lost sheep of Israel. And that's like, what? He went to this region to meet this woman who is of a different race and ethnic group. Yet when he gets there, he's saying to her, like, I'm only sent for the lost sheep of Israel, right? And that's a bit confusing. I'll dive into that in a second. And then the woman came and knelt before him and said, Lord, help me. She even, despite, and I truly believe in this parable that, like, Jesus sees color. And there have been some commentaries made, like, this is where, you see, like, Jesus is racist. I don't think at all like, I think the complete opposite, and I will show you, or I'll tell you why in a second. And so he says, I was sent only to the lost sheep of Israel, right? But the woman persists and she says, Lord, help me. And so he replies, it is not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs. And so this implied, and the dogs here they're talking about are, like, those small, like, really cute dogs. But here it implies that the bread of the children is what he's giving to the Israelites, right? That the children are the Israelites, and then the, like, dogs are the Canaanites, or the Gentiles, any other people besides the Israelites, which also sounds kind of like, oh, what? Stick with me here, okay? And then she persists and she says, like, Lord, even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table. And then only then does Jesus say, woman, you have great faith, your request is granted. And I think that this parable shows a picture of a woman's persistence and of Jesus almost like a kind of like testing her, right? Like, he knew that he was going to meet this woman, and he went to this region to meet this woman's needs, right? That was the reason that he went there, because after that he goes along the Sea of Galilee and goes to feed the 4,000, right? And so he went to this region specifically to meet this woman and to meet her needs, right? But when he got there, he and he says like I was here, I am the God of the Jews, right? I have been sent only to the lost sheep of Israel. But she persists and she says, but Lord, even though you are here to give, like, the children bread, right? I still want to pick up crumbs. And I think it shows a picture. It's crazy that the Pharisees would, the Jewish people would reject their own savior, and this woman who is hungry, this woman who looks completely different to Jesus, who is completely hungry for what he has to offer. She's saying, like, I just want a taste of it. I just want a little bit, Lord. That's all I want. And then, of course, he's not going to deny her. Then he says, okay, then your faith has healed you, right? And I think this just shows a beautiful picture of Jesus recognizing race, recognizing differences, but still loving equally. And he chooses to see it all, but he chooses to stay, and and so I think just, and we can dive much more into this parable. That's just my limited understanding, and please go read up on this parable. But I don't think that this shows Jesus's racism. He never had such, I don't believe that. I think it shows a picture of Jesus recognizing differences, because you can't move around in life like pretending like we're all the same, because we're not all the same. There are differences. Recognizing differences, recognizing that even recognizing privilege, right? Recognizing that the Jews have the privilege of Jesus, and this is my own interpretation, and recognizing that, okay, there is white privilege, and it is there, and it is a very real thing. But also, at the same time, choosing to push past, choosing to, like, as a person who's not a white person, and this is now like moving away from the parable, choosing to push past that. I saw this beautiful video on Instagram. If you go to, I'll try and link it below. I don't know if you can link an IGTV video, but that just talks about, like, privilege, but just because the privilege isn't in your favor doesn't mean you have to stay back, but yeah, and just with that, this woman begged Jesus, and she was thirsty. Jesus' own people who he came to give the gospel to, right? they didn't want him. They rejected him. Yet this woman of a different region, different ethnicity, really wanted him, and what he had to offer. And so of course he gave it to her. And I think that the church should be a place that emulates love, that emulates diversity, because that just shows a picture of Christ and his church, just like how marriage is supposed to reflect a picture of Christ and his church. The church literally is supposed to show a picture of Christ and his church, and a diverse church, a church that sees it all and loves everyone still, a church that is comfortable in its differences but also united in those differences and not divided, a church that doesn't treat other people differently because of the color of their skin, or a church that doesn't treat men and women as less than, because we're equals, but obviously have different roles, and a church that is constantly gaining more knowledge, a church that is constantly educating themselves, a church that is constantly checking their own biases, checking their own hearts, checking their own prejudices. And the crazy thing is, we are the church. You and I are the church. And so it starts with us, and it starts with us showing up. We have to show up. Now is the time to show up. Now is the time, to speak up. If you don't know what to do, let's say you're listening to this, you are not a person of color, reach out to people of color, read up, educate. But also, I think just for everyone across the board, now is the time as well to watch the words we put out. What we put out is so, so powerful. And don't, just watch what you're saying, watch your responses. May they be filled with love. I love the verse, may your words ever be seasoned with I don't know what the verse is, but it's in Proverbs. I'll leave it in the show notes below. But it says, may your words ever be seasoned with salt, may they be graceful, whatever it is. I can't remember the words. I will include it in next week's, I'll include it in next week's verse of the day or whatever. But it's may your words ever be seasoned with salt, graceful and whatever. Also crazy that words can be as soothing as honey and healing to the bones. Another Proverbs gem. I will also include that in next week's podcast and in the show notes below. But I just wanted to show up here and to say yes, I am a person of color. No, I don't know it all. Yes, I've messed up so much. Yes, I have my own prejudices. But I think now is the time to speak out. Now is the time to be unified. And we are the church. We should be the standard of what, diversity and unity and beauty among a community looks like. We should be a picture of the fact that love is not blind, of the fact that race is not blind. But yeah, and so I hope this was a good episode for you. This is a very nuanced issue. I love the word nuance. Heard it 2 or 3 years ago, and I think it's one of the most beautiful words, nuance. But this is a nuanced issue, and there's lots of aspects, and it's not going to change overnight. But it doesn't help to give up and to not be part of the change. It also doesn't help to put others down while doing it, And so we can be part of the change, but it starts with you. You are the church, the people are the church, and let's just turn to Jesus and reflect on any of our own prejudices, biases, racism, any of that. And so I hope, and there can be beauty found in all of this. There truly can be beauty, and there is beauty found in all of this. And so I hope you liked this episode. Honestly, an honest conversation, or a conversation about race, racism, and being a Black woman. But I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you so much for listening, friend. This was a very just showing up episode, and sharing that I don't know it all, that I haven't been great with it all, but I am choosing to show up still. And so I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please share it with your friends and family. and with anyone follow the Project Lumiere on Instagram at the Project Lumiere. Go to the blog theprojectlumiere.com. All the links are in the show notes below, and let our words be graceful, seasoned with salt, just like how the perfect amount of salt just seasons a meal perfectly, and let's just check our biases, friend, and let's check our own prejudices, and let's check our hearts, because out of the abundance of the mouth the heart speaks, or whatever it is. Out of what comes out of your mouth is a direct reflection of what comes out of your heart. And so thank you so much for listening, friend. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I feel like I've been going on with this intro for ages, but I just wanted, today's quote is from Netflix, but I've been seeing it all over social media, and I think it's beautiful, and it just says, to be silent is to be complicit. Black Lives Matter. We have a platform, and we have a duty to our Black members, employees, creators, and talent to speak up. And so, bye, friend.